I have been fascinated by 3D printed compliant mechanisms for a really long time. But when I saw Mark Rober's recent video on the subject, it seemed like a message from the universe that I needed to incorporate one of those into my own design. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you've been following along, you know that I'm trying to build a robot that's capable of sorting coins by date. If I can do that, I should be able to easily find coins to add to my own collection. One of the challenges I face, though, is building a part that's capable of holding onto a coin and rotating it between two cameras so that both sides of the coin can be photographed at once and identified. Over the last few videos, I've showed some of the challenges I faced when designing that part, and in this video, we're going to improve the design by incorporating a compliant mechanism. After watching Mark Rober's video, I began thinking about compliant mechanisms and how those would actually work. The problem was that I didn't really know how to design any of these things, so I had to start making different versions just so I could understand it. This was my first attempt, and I really liked this idea, and it seemed to work okay. We're getting some good action here, but as you can see, there are some issues there because those springs actually broke off the edge of the workpiece there. So we're actually only having these two springs down here connected, and those are the only ones that are actuating the piece. But I felt like I was on the right track. It was nice because this would have taken this would have been two pieces just for this little section of the coin slider, but I was actually able to print it all in one go. So I felt like I was on the right track. The problem was that I didn't really know how to design compliant mechanisms to do exactly what you wanted, so I had to do some testing. So I began iterating on it. And the first few designs I had were to kind of go on that theme, but I was really making them too complicated. You can see that I was trying to make a spring shape here and a spring shape down here, but these ended up being too thick, and it actually takes much too much force to push down on this in order to get it to spring back. So I tried making thinner versions of those springs, and again, it just required too much force to squeeze those together, and they weren't really coming back into position. So I began thinking about better ways of doing that. What I came up with next was to try to put a diagonal brace along here. But anyone who does any engineering understands that anything at an angle like this is actually kind of structural. And no matter how hard you press on this, it really does not give at all. There's no spring at all to that. And that's because this distance across the hypotenuse here is actually wider than the distance across here. And as I got thinking about that, I was like, I made a really strong structural piece, but that doesn't do what I want it to do. It doesn't have that compliance that I need in order to grab onto a penny. And again, I tried to make it thinner, but all that did was just end up deforming the piece in 3 dimensions because these structural bars are just too strong. They don't want to comply, and they're the wrong shape. So it actually forces it out of 2-dimensional space and into 3D space because those parts are so strong. So obviously I was barking up the wrong tree with that idea. For my next idea, I thought I could just go straight across because this bar would be the same distance across there. But again, I made these a little too thick and they don't really bend as well as I'd like them to. They ended up being structural as well. The thing that I did like was that you could print this in place so that this, in theory, could slide up and down. And these center portions here were attached. So in theory, you should be able to get some compliance there. But again, no matter how hard I push, you have to push way too hard on this in order to get any action at all on that. So that's not quite what we're looking for. So I thought that maybe I just made these a little bit too thick. So I started to go thinner. In this version, I went a little bit thinner and kind of got some goop here from my printer. Didn't come out that great. This one just seems a little too sloppy. And again, it is, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's pushing these sides in. It's pulling those in when we press down on this. So this is starting to work. And when I press on this, we're getting some compliance, which is heading in the right direction. But when I let go, you can see that it doesn't really spring back. So you can see in this area right there that that is not going back to its original shape, which we would need it to do in order to maintain positive control of the penny at all times. So although we're getting some compliance, it's not quite right because it doesn't have enough spring to return back to its original shape. And I tried one more time, making everything just a little bit thinner, including the spaces in between the lines here. But again, this deforms, but doesn't spring back to its original shape. So we're close here, but not quite right. Again, I'm just very happy that I could get the tolerances correct along these lines so that it can print in place, have some, not stick together along the edge there, but still have some compliance. So we're on the right track. The next idea I had was to make that space curved. And this was starting to work a little bit better. Again, you have to put quite a bit of force on that in order to have any compliance. But as you can see, it's already starting to come back to its original shape. So that's a really nice feature of this particular design. It's compliant and it returns back. But again, in this version of the coin slider, I believe that these are just a little too thick and it requires too much force to actually push this down into place. And we don't want that. We want it to be a little easier to move down, and then when we release, we want it to return back to its original shape. And so I ended up with this version. I made these center pieces just a little bit thinner, and I'm pretty happy with the way that this turned out. We can see that we have pretty good compliance there, and we're getting a good spring action. Again, these parts are moving inwards as we pull down, but when you release this, these pull back, and it actually helps this to come back into position a little bit better. So it's not perfect, but it is much better than the other version. So we're getting a much better return spring back to normal. Now in this version, there's some compliance there, some springiness there, and it doesn't take too much force to push down, and it also returns back to its original position pretty well. This design really doesn't hold on to anything. The penny just kind of floats in there. So I got thinking about that, and what we could do is we could create just compliance in the top portion of that. But that would mean that we would have to push down on this in order to hold on to the penny. If only half of this were compliant, if say the top half were compliant, we could push down on this and it would hold on to the penny. But we would need to keep that pressure on the top of this in order to hold the penny. And like I said in the last few videos, I actually want the penny to be held by default and released only when we press on the bar. But we can take what we learned in the last few videos about working in 3 dimensions, and we can create a part that actually works. This isn't really working on camera. I'm going to print this out again in black and red so that you can see the different layers a little bit better. All right, and this basically shows the new design and how that should work. We have another part here that we can put into position that actually just snaps into place. And now this is still compliant. So you can see that you have to push down on this bar in order to release the penny, and it returns basically back into position. But when we have a penny in there, It holds the penny by default, and you have to push on the bar in order to release it. So this is a promising design. I think this is going to end up being my finished work. And again, we have some compliance here that springs back into action. And we only need that to move just a little bit. So it doesn't have to come back fully into position. It just needs to hold the penny and be able to release it. So there's really only a fraction of a millimeter that needs to move and return. Again, I'll show you what that looks like. Hold the penny in position. Again, when we push down on this bar, that releases the penny. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is going to be a really good design. You can see that this has full thickness here and here, so we can positively hold on to the penny. And these pieces normally snap together. But I think I'm going to actually end up putting a little bit of super glue in the corners here to hold this piece in place. So we're basically going to put one of these in each one of the positions on the coin slider. And when we want to release a penny, we will push down on this lever. Again, there's going to be a follower that goes along the outside edge here, and we will have cams on the outside edge here that push down on this bar when we want to release the penny. I'll show you how that works in more detail in a later video, but I just wanted to show you this because I'm pretty excited about how this all turned out. Now, oddly, I don't think I reduced the part count all that much, but I think I'm getting closer to being able to print a part like this completely in place. If anyone knows of any resources about how to design compliant mechanisms for 3D printing, please leave them down below in the comments because I'd really like to learn more about this. If there's a better way to do this, I would really like to learn it. So please, if you have any information about compliant mechanisms in 3D printers, please share that information with me because I still believe that I can make this better. But we're pretty close. I believe we're pretty close to the finished part, and this is basically the way I want it to work. We're going to make a little bit wider outside edge on this so that the cam can follow that and push it down a little more easily. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the results here. In the next video, we're going to work on those cams. That should help us work out the timing of the coin grabbing and release mechanisms. But for now, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay awesome. Hey everyone, it's Future Me. I just wanted to take a moment to say that I've been doing some work on our website at thecoinbot.com. There you can find the latest blog articles about coin collecting, the latest developments in machine learning, and get early access to my YouTube videos.